All right, why do you look like a mad scientist right now with the glasses and the hat? You look
Well,
like something's.
I'll tell you what. Here, is this better? Does it look like now we're in?
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and
Now you look like
the
you could
mad
go to the
scientist
skate park
thing,
with me.
the mad scientist thing is that Juliet and I are almost 50, and someone slammed the doors on my eyes, and so I got these glasses instead. And it really is useful because I was going to either have one of that Gattaca surgeries where you have to lengthen your arms, or I had a brain tumor or terrible allergies, and it turned out it was needing glasses.
So I've been fighting it, fighting it, and I think it's working. I think like forcing my eyes to like read stuff because I look at my friends and I'll grab their phone and I'm like, what is this 87 font? Like what? How big is this?
It
And
look
I've got it on the original and
just because your friends are now using the jitterbug phone, isn't that the phone for like old people? And I understand that. Literally though, I woke up one day because my dad died of a brain tumor. So I'm like, hey Juliet, I think I have a brain tumor. She's like, you probably don't have a brain
yeah.
tumor, hon. And I was like, no, I'm sure I'm a physical therapist. I'm like, I know brain tumors. And she was like, no. And I was like, maybe I have bad allergies. So I was literally stuffing Claritin in my mouth. I was huffing all of the nose drugs. And then it turned out I needed glasses. Just reading glasses. Don't get me wrong. I'm still like, I could still see you 2010, motherfucker. I could still crush you from across the room. But if it's up close, you're basically blurry.
Well, if I had my contact lenses out, I wouldn't know who you are right now.
I love you're like, I'm fighting it, except for this technology that's just really convenient. How are you, man?
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Well, I'm doing well. I'm glad to talk to you. I want to keep on this subject because there's something really funny here. I do have like, I do have I'm really nearsighted. So like without my contacts, I'm blind and I lose my contacts surfing sometimes. And I have to ask people, I'm like, can you show me which way the beach is like, because I don't want to paddle to China. So
Again,
do I go that way? But they said at a certain point you're going to need reading glasses too. And okay, so here's where it gets crazy.
that's a step too far. I understand that.
So Crazy Bobby, who I have on the show all the time, tells me that you can do eye exercises and
That's
you
true.
can, and I'm like, you're full of shit, blah, 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 blah. So I hear this guy on Sean Baker's podcast, Sean Baker, the median guy. Yeah, Carnival. And I hear this doctor on there that's claiming that, that the whole optometry institute is a scam and they've just forced people into glasses and that it's all exercises that we should do for our eyes and we can repair our eyes, blah, 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 blah. Then randomly I get a message from him, from this guy. It's almost like he worked for Alexa and saying, hey, I want to come on your podcast. So I do all my research about him because I'm like, this guy sounds like a scam artist. So, but I'm like, why would Dr. Sean Baker have him on? Isn't he's a doctor. Wouldn't he see through this bullshit? This must be legit. So I contacted a bunch of optometrists and ophthalmologists and they were all like, yeah, the guy's full of shit. And I'm like, are you saying this because this is your business? You don't want to lose your business. But then I try to get a hold of the guy and he lives in like Costa Rica or something. And, and he's running this like training program out of Costa Rica that you pay up and he'll fix your eyesight. And so, needless to say, I didn't believe him, but my optometrist told me to keep my contacts, not get LASIK, because all of my buddies that I surf with have pterygiums, I think they're called.
Yeah,
Which are
pterygiums.
these little like gross little like zits on their eyes. And he said I won't get it because my contacts are polarized. And I'm like protecting my eyes from the sun by surfing out there with contact lenses in.
Well, here's what I think. I think there's probably some mid ground there. In the gym right now, we're trying to do everything. We're trying to work on every vector ray, load every tissue, strengthen every system, rotate, play, hydrate the fat. Like, it's insane what you're supposed to get done in 60 minutes, right? It's not like, hey, you deadlift, we tell some jokes, we do some cardio, and go home. And the big problem is that you aren't going outside doing any sports anymore. Everyone is going to the gym, maybe, and then they're staring in front of their computer on their phone all day. And we've actually run this experiment with prisoners where you put prisoners in isolation. They have fixed depth gaze and their vision deteriorates because the eye is supposed to work. Just like you're saying, it's a muscle and you're supposed to squint and then you're supposed to look far and you're supposed to squint. You're supposed to play Frisbee and catch stuff and throw stuff and ride a mountain bike and look far and look close. We don't do that anymore. So on the one hand, we are seeing, and the research actually is that like kids' eyes are failing much, much earlier. But there is this something called aging. And I think that confounds this notion because your lens gets a little stiffer. It doesn't deform as well. And that, who knows, there's a lot of things that could go into that. But simultaneously, I don't know if you know this, but people have been wearing glasses for a long, long time. Definitely readers have been around for a minute. So I'm not saying that we should look at our historical data, but there are changes, and it's made compounded the fact that I don't think people are actually working their eyes at all. So I think that there is some low-hanging fruit to improve. Do you need a 4.0? Probably not. Do you need like maybe a reading glass temporarily? And does it make it easier to read? And sometimes leave your reading glasses at home, but I couldn't read a book right now, you know? And I'm aware of these things. There's an app called Glasses Off where you actually like follow this Gabor thing around and it just makes you perceive. Because I think people are their perception, you know, reading glasses are one thing, and then brain perception and processing is another thing. And so there's another aspect of that leg. Yes, your eyes are weak and soft. You have milquetoast eyes, which is the biggest insult you could possibly throw at a man. You have milquetoast eyes. And then simultaneously, you have a processing issue. And then that really sets us up for this greater conversation of like, well, should I just be living in a little 72-degree controlled environment and walking on flat surfaces? And do I not sit on the ground? And, you know, you can take that a step too far, of course. Like you need to do simulated hunts and you know, hunt your grass-fed meat in the store. And simultaneously, though, I think people don't go outside. You know, you're probably designed to get full UV light through your eyes your whole life. But a lot of us wear glasses 24/7 outdoors. Maybe that's part of the problem. You know, I just, you bring up a really interesting point. What is essential for us as humans to maintain our physicality and our physical beings? And then where are we losing the narrative on that?
Crazy Bobby said to me one day, he goes, "Why are you wearing sunglasses?" And I go, "I don't know." He goes, "Does a hawk wear sunglasses?"
Ooh, burns. I love it. I think, you know, that's, I really like that. I appreciate that line of thinking, actually, you know, on so many levels. Hawk, you know, there may be some error in your logic there, Bobby. But it is a good point that, you know, humans around, you know.
So one day I posted a video one day. I was mountain biking. I ran over a rattlesnake, like just screaming like as loud as I could. It was just in the middle of the path, went over it. And all I get is a text from Bobby that says, maybe if you didn't have sunglasses on, you would have seen the rattlesnake.
Well, it wasn't a problem for you. It was a problem for the second person behind you, right? That was the, you know, an avalanche is like you never go third or something like that. There's some, you know, you're fine to run over rattlesnakes, but he is right. I mean, the rattlesnake was wearing sunglasses. It couldn't see you either. That was the problem, right? Little snake glasses. Anyway, here we are trying to untangle this hot Gordian knot of humanness.
I'm going to give you another eye thing. So one day I come back from Costa Rica. I have a headache like I've never had in my life. I don't know what it is. And
guaro. It's the guaro.
Kind of like a sinus headache. And I was like, oh, you know what? I just, you know, surfed for 6 hours a day. My head's full of salt water. It just got up there, inflamed my sinuses, blah, blah, blah. I'm sitting on the toilet and I sneeze and a worm comes out of my nose. Like this big.
So are you saying I don't need glasses? I have worms? Is that what you're saying? Is that
Hold on. So I'm start to freak out. I put this worm in a plastic bag and I'm like, I think I should probably go to the emergency room. Like this is, and I got a buddy that I work out with at CrossFit Malibu who's an emergency room doctor. I call him and he surfs all the time. So he's been all over Mexico and Costa Rica. And he's like, whoa, dude, this is awesome.
Not what you want to hear.
No. And I'm like, no, it's not. And he's like, first of all, how big is it? And I sent him a text. He goes, that didn't go up there in Costa Rica. That went up there a long time ago. He goes, that's pretty big. And he goes, you sure it's a worm? I'm like, I think it's a worm. So I like wait another day. The next day, I'm walking out of the house, and all of a sudden it felt like I was on a mushroom trip. Like my eyes, everything started going like, like that I had to cover my eyes because I'm like, oh my God, like I'm about to faint. I can't understand why this is happening. And and then I go to my wife. I'm like, get in the car. I can't drive. Like I couldn't even open my eyes because the brightness was hurting them so badly. And I was like, I got like a brain eating amoeba or something. We got to get to the emergency room. So we're driving to the hospital. And emergency room's pretty far from where I live, but my optometrist is on the way, and I'm buddies with him. I go, pull over, and I run in and I go, dude, I go, my eye. And so as soon as I'm done, he goes, I think you had this thing. I think it's called an aurora or something. And he's like, you like a sinus? Yeah. He goes, it's not uncommon. You probably never get it again. You might get it again. It's no big deal. And I was like, it's not the worm. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I would still go get checked. And so I go to the emergency room. I give them the worm, and the doctor's looking at me. He's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, look at this thing. Look at this. He's like, pretty much, it's nothing. He's like, that's like phlegm. I'm like, it's not phlegm. Feel it. And he's like, I'm not going to feel it, but I'm telling you, it's not phlegm. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's a worm crawled up my nose in Costa Rica.
Sir, this is Dennis.
So he doesn't call me back for days. And I'm like, should I say goodbye to my children? Should I what's happening? Do I have a brain tumor? And the guy calls me back like a week later. He's like, oh, by the way, the test came back. That was nothing. I'm like, what do you mean it was nothing? He's like, it's nothing. It's not phlegm. It's not a worm. It's not an organ. It's phlegm. And I'm like, that was the weirdest booger that ever came out of my nose ever.
And if you'd had glasses, you would have seen it was like seaweed.
Yeah, exactly.
However, dude, we have a bunch of friends who are like the world champion adventure racers, and they've done Raid Galois and Eco Challenge. And one of our friends came back and pooped a big worm after being in Borneo. So the worm thing is real. And we have another friend who was Meryl Streep's stunt double in A River Wild, and she ran this section of the White Nile, and got neuroschistosomiasis. She got schistosomiasis, laid eggs in her spine. Now she's paralyzed. So parasites are real, and
are no joke.
So, for example, Juliet, my wife, is a 3-time world champion, and she was attacked by a hippo on a canoe safari on the Zambezi River in Africa. So they've just won the world championships. They're downstream. They're paddling around, and hippo attacks her canoe. Teeth goes through the boat. She gets cut. She's in the water. The crocs. The hippo's chomping the boat. She swims to shore. 3 more days in the canoe. 4 more days in the canoe. They just duct tape a lid. By way of saying that now we really respect animals. People are like, you're not going to get attacked by a bear. Well, you could get attacked by a bear. You're not going to get attacked by a shark. We're like, these things do happen. They've happened to us. So, you snort one worm out of like a mezcal bottle in college. I mean, you've cracked that Pandora's box. Like you can't go back. So I think it's really reasonable to freak out.
I watched a kid at my 501 party when Rush ends. When I first joined my fraternity, he chugs the worm, pukes it up, and I hear a bunch of fraternity brothers yell, "Eat it!" And he grabs it out of his puke and he eats it again. And I was like, that's going to be my friend right there. That's my new best friend.
That's brother. That's brothers. That's amazing.
That's fraternity. Yeah. I don't joke around. And that's a question I have for you. Knowing all the medical knowledge you have and all the being a physical therapist for so many years, I know such a small amount. And I don't know if it's dangerous because I know it or it's a good thing, but I am such a hypochondriac. And then every time, like you said, you thought you had a brain tumor. I can find, I've called you 1,000 times where I'm like, Kelly, my nerves are shot. I think I have ALS. I automatically go to the most devastating one. I start preparing for my funeral. I'm, it's always, do I have a brain tumor? Am I starting to get paralyzed? Am I going blind? And I don't know. I mean, I've read about pre-meds disease, But part of me is like, how do I get rid of this? It's such a bad, I mean, I think it's part of my interest in health is that I'm like, okay, I want to be on top of everything to make sure I can take care of myself.
Yeah, that's a really part of the problem is people want to name for something, they want to diagnose something. You know, around, like, just so we're clear, my default self-diagnosis is I have meningitis all the time. I'm like, oh, it's meningitis. Like, Juliet's like, no, you just haven't had any water today. I'm like, I'm sure it's meningitis. I'm sure it's meningitis. And I think one of the issues actually currently today is especially musculoskeletal healthcare, is that we lost the narrative on pain massively. We lost our relationship to pain. We lost our relationship. Then the Sacklers came in and ruined that. And then we used pain as a vital sign for a while in medicine, where, like, that was, instead of really understanding the nature of pain. And that meant that it was easy for us to catastrophize right away when we had pain. Pain is a medical problem. We have to manage this pain. And, you know, it's an easy lens to start to sell stuff to people. And, like, you know, you have to do these things. Your body is fragile. If you round your back, your spine will explode. And what we are working towards shifting this narrative around is saying that, hey, do you have some basic training of when you should go get help? Like, you're getting crazy visions and a worm comes out of your nose. It's reasonable to go to the doctor. That's actually super reasonable. We want everyone to understand red flags. Do you have night sweats, dizziness, fever, vomiting, nausea, unaccounted for weight loss, weight gain, changes in bladder bowel function? Are you pooping yourself when you sneeze? Like, there's some things that are coming up that if you have a fever and it smells like you're sick, you should go to the emergency room. That's that. And we want everyone on the planet to have that, so that everyone is triaging each other. Hey, bro, like, you have a crushing headache and you're losing your vision. This is a stroke. You know, these are the symptoms of a heart attack. Let's get you out of here. We've had a couple people at our gym show up and they're like, hey, I don't know if I should warm up today. And we're like, we start to talk to them and we're like, well, we call 911 and they have strokes. They're having a stroke. Wow. We catch it and send them to the ER, and the docs call us and we're like, thanks very much for saving this person's life. All we did was like saying, hey, I don't think you're appropriate to train today. Like, you know, we're not gonna do it. Do you want to do a handstand push-up? No. All right, let's leave. So, but simultaneously, we want everyone else to understand, and this clear line of saying that, hey, can you do your job? Can you do your role in the family? Can you occupy a role in society? Is there a bone sticking out of your leg? No. Do you have a red flag, like a fever going on? No. Well, if you can answer like, hey, I don't have a trauma, like where I heard something snap, or I know I have a clear mechanism of injury, I didn't get hit by a car, but I can still do my job. You're not injured. You have pain, and there may be something going on, and your brain may be working hard to tell you, I need you to change something. And that change could be many, many, many things. That could be you're stressed. That makes you more likely to experience pain. You can be highly congested and inflamed. One of my coach friends, Yami Tikkanen, you know, super coach, Annie Torrey's daughter's coach. He and I were doing a little tour through Europe 10 years ago, training, coaching, teaching. We were doing this mad dash, like 5 countries, 7 courses, and we were eating all the waffles. We were on a pastry pro fun tour. We may had not like drinking all the alcohol, and he had injured his finger on the national judo team back when he was a much younger kid. And all of a sudden, that old judo injury, literally, he's like, I can't flex my finger. I'm so inflamed. My finger is stuck. This is where I dislocated it. So our not sleeping, our drinking, our pastry shenanigans led his body to revolt, where suddenly he became sensitized. So there can be some lifestyle stuff we have to talk about. So when I'm trying to work through pain or problems with my athletes, I talk to them. Tell me about your sleep. How do you track it? How do I know? Like, we have to make sure we're not making a basic error in that thing. Are you getting sunlight? Do you feel loved? Do you feel safe at home? I mean, those things are true. Are you under stress at work? Then we can start saying, well, are you moving like a jackass? Because, and I don't mean that you have to move perfectly, but there are ways of moving that are more effective and less effective. Like heel striking, you can heel strike for a long time, but that's not a very effective way to run. It's a less effective way to run. And it may be that your body suddenly became sensitized to that. So we can change your mechanics or improve. Hey, I see that every time you bend over and you round your back, and that's just less effective. So let's see if we can get you more of a mid-range position, a little bit more organized, where you can take a breath, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, you're sitting 12 hours a day. Let's just sit less than 12 hours a day and see if that doesn't change. But then we can also ask, like, do you have normal range of motion in your joints and tissues? Can you put your arms over your head? Yes or no? So when suddenly we start to ask those questions, right? Is there something you can do to improve the health or the robustness of the system? Turns out any one of those things could be enough to change your pain or turn off the pain. Because remember, your brain is basically interpreting signals from your body as threat or non-threat. That's really the truth. And I've seen people with broken bones that we manage the congestion of, like we decongest the tissues, we pump it out, they have no swelling, they go into the ER, and the doctor's like, you don't have a broken collarbone because you're not in pain. And because they don't have any swelling, he's like, put your hand here, and the bones are grinding together, and they're like, they're obviously it's a complete fracture. And the guy's like, wow, I can't believe this, you don't have any pain. So we want you to understand pain is a liar. Pain is a request for change. But as long as we have come out of this tradition of the 80s and 90s where we were given opiates and we're managing pain and thinking that you're fragile, and then we have a group of people who just aren't loading their bodies, aren't getting in sun, don't eat meat and fruits and vegetables, who are like arguing about this on the internet while they're in their lazy boys. What we're seeing is this sort of amalgam where it is easy to start to become fearful of your body, instead of realizing that your body really and truly is extraordinary and will put up with your crap for a long time.
You said something to me once that I use as kind of a mantra that I use when I think I'm dying. You said the human body is difficult to kill. And I've seen it. I saw my mom pass away in the hospital at 87 years old, and she was so frail and had been through so much. She had aortic dissection. She had pulmonary fibrosis and blah, blah, blah. And this is during COVID. And I was like, if she gets COVID, she'll die because she's got all these compounding things going on. The littlest thing will take, she's going to, and she did, she died in her sleep, not from COVID, but just couldn't make it through the night one night. And it was like, so you were hearing about people dying from COVID that had all these comorbidities. It's like, well, of course, if anything hits them, pneumonia hits them, COVID hits them, any kind of virus hits them, it's probably going to take them out at that point. But I watched her just battle and battle and battle. And I was like, well, geez, I get like a pain in my finger and I start complaining. And here's my mom going through, just things that should have wiped her out one after another. And her body just kept staying alive. So I'm always amazed when you hear about somebody like dying in their sleep or they were young and this happened and cancer took them out. It's like, wow, because I think the body's pretty amazing at putting up this giant fight.
And we want to tell people that, hey, look, respect your pain, listen to it. It's telling you it's information. So for our high level athletes, we view honestly, of course.
Okay.
We view pain as just another data point, like heart rate variability or resting heart rate or wattage or poundage. Hey, if you went for a big run yesterday and your knee's sore today, it's probably knee cancer. Let's be honest. It probably is, or it's gonorrhea. Like it's one of those two things that are popping up. Or you went for a big run yesterday and you didn't get a chance to reduce the session costs. And now you're a little stiff or you're a little congested because you played college soccer and now your joint surfaces aren't pristine like toddler joints anymore. And instead, what we tell people is, like, we haven't empowered anyone to deal with that. Instead, you're like, holy crap, what do? Let me take this ibuprofen. I don't want to feel the pain. Pain is bad. I don't want to, let me drink this bourbon. Let me take this THC. Let me take whatever I can do to self-soothe. And I think that's really one of the issues, that we are self-soothing our way out of important information. Instead of saying, well, hey, it's a little sore. Can you walk around? Great. Let's walk today. Is there any other thing you can do? Can we manage the congestion? Can we mobilize your tissues some way? Can we just give it a second?
When is it, where it's just DOMS, that you've got delayed onset muscle soreness and your body's going,
yes, you need to go for a walk today or float in a pool. That's right.
Sure. But I feel like there's pain and then there's DOMS. And DOMS is your muscles are sore, they're or whatever. I've read all this new stuff about it being the nerves and the I'm not smart enough to understand it, but what I'm saying is we've been through DOMS so many times in our life, and knowing that it's just, hey, this is just our muscles repairing themselves, but maybe not go too hard because we could cause an injury right now because our muscles aren't firing at their total capacity. But there's also this like, hey, this is just a matter of getting in shape. So when do you ignore DOMS and when do you take it seriously?
Well, again, if your DOMS is so bad that you can't go to work, you can't be a father, can't be a mother, can't be a parent, can't be a co-parent, you can't do your job, you start to get swelling, you're peeing, you have a fever, then obviously you've tripped over into something else, and that's not delayed onset muscle soreness. But what you bring up is a really good point. We have friends in the World Championship for mountain biking is next weekend, and I think it's France, and maybe not, maybe it's wherever it is. And if I dropped into the brain of this woman, is one of my friends named Kate Courtney. She's the best American cyclist out there, and she's a world champion, World Cup winner. She's rode in the Olympics. If I dropped into her brain in the middle of a World Cup world final, like I would perish. I would just perish. I would just die and melt. Like she would expose her Horcrux to me, and I would die. And because the amount of pain that she says this is normal and typical, I've had a graded exposure to this my whole life. I've suffered. So imagine a generation of people who've never been sore, and you really get sore for the first time and you think you're injured because you don't have any frame of reference, which is one of the reasons why we want kids to train and exercise and play and be sore. So your brain starts to say, hey, it's totally fine. It's totally fine how you feel right now. You get up in the morning and you don't think that, it's okay for your back to be sore after heavy deadlifts. Ideally, we don't do that. We want you to try to come out without joint soreness. But sometimes if you go lift 1,000,000 pounds of sand as you work on a project and be in weird positions, and you may be a little bit sore. But what we haven't done is given people any references for what's normal, what's typical. Is this a normal experience? Hey, what do I do about this? Well, hey, I just need to take it easier today and go walk around. Can I make myself feel better without some kind of exogenous substance? I don't have to smother this down. And I think what you're bringing up, that first idea of, where people are not having these experiences in their bodies, where they know what it's like to be hungry, where they know what it's like to be cold, where they know what it's like to be hot, where they know what it's like to be scared. We're having to sort of manufacture these things. Look, I'm a huge fan of the hot and the cold because I think you can get super hot every day. I think that's really good for you. For Juliet and I, it allows us to chill, but we get into our cold plunge and it's like a small death, right? You freak out, you watch yourself. And some of that is just, hey, I practice this over and over. Is it good for my immune system? Sure. Is it good for my circulation? But just the psychology of like, today I'm going to be uncomfortable for 2 minutes. I'm going to get into this ice water and think and have this existential crisis. The problem is that most of us have zero of those. And so when something happens, man, we elevate very quickly because we don't have any exposure.
I am a firm believer in that, not just so much the ice bath, but I used to have anxiety years ago, like probably 15 years ago. I was getting panic attacks out of the blue for no reason, And I was like, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to figure this out. I want this to stop. And I didn't go to a psychiatrist. I didn't get medication. I was just like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. What did I do differently? How did things change? Blah, blah, blah. And I cured it. And I'm not going to say I cured it. It went away. But one of the things I figured out was, and I think this is just my theory on it, that we are used to being scared and going into fight or flight traditionally, like evolutionarily wise, constantly in, times of our life being in fight or flight. And as we get safer and safer in this world, we're not in fight or flight. And so my adrenaline is just like, hey, I'm here. I'm manufactured. I have to go. I can't go anywhere because you're not doing anything. So I'm just going to let it go. And I'm putting adrenaline into you. And all of a sudden I'm going, why am I panicking? Why am I in this state of panic? And I'm just sitting here, in the green room of a comedy club or at my kitchen having breakfast. Why am I having a panic attack? And so one of the things I started doing was scaring myself again and putting myself in scary situations, like surfing waves that were kind of consequence, or mountain biking down hills that I shouldn't be mountain biking and putting myself into those little fearful situations. And I don't know, but I don't have it anymore. It's gone. And so,
yeah, a way of thinking of that is we like to say around our house, you don't get something for nothing. Like your secret squirrel superpower of being quick, of interacting in the world, of playing comes with a price tag. And that price tag is you need to go, do this thing. And if you don't move and experience this in some way, it manifests as anxiety. So you came up with you're like, oh, I just need these inputs and outputs. And I think if everyone had a slightly different version of that for themselves, get to know yourself a little bit, right? We just haven't empowered anyone. If we did some preliminary research right before the pandemic. We were looking at trying to get kids moving more in schools. And we asked, some of the surveys we asked was like, well, how much do you need to move? How much? Kids had no idea. Do you need to sleep? How much? Kids had no idea. These are 5th and 6th graders. Tell me about what is good food and how much do you need to eat? No idea. And so what we're seeing is oftentimes, we're poorly preparing adults for how to self-soothe, how to move. And if you really look, here's going to be a really vulnerable moment. Dune is my favorite book in the world. There we go. I said it. Just so you Dune haters out there. But Paul sticks his hand in the box and she introduces this pain where he thinks he's dying, right? His hand is literally burning off. And the test is, she's testing him psychologically. Does he have the wherewithal to keep his hand in the box? Yes or no? And she puts a needle in his neck and it's like, hey, if you pull your hand out of the box, I'm going to kill you. So he has this choice. I'm going to withdraw from this painful stimulus like an animal, or I'm going to keep my hand in the box because I can override these feelings and work this through. And I'm conscious enough of my own process and I'm self-aware that I can take it. And he pulls his hand out of the box. He's kind of like, what the hell, lady? And she's like, look, our test is crisis and observation. And that for me, when I first read that a million years ago, I was like, oh, that's why I really love going kayaking and scaring myself on these Class 5 rivers. Because I get to see how I deal in these situations. I get to see how I handle, I paddled in the World Cup where like you're at the start of a World Cup race and man, you're stressful. And how do you handle that? You have to do the thing. And if we just take the pandemic and use that as the crisis, how did we do? Well, it turned out we were more depressed afterwards. We were more addicted to drugs. And again, self-soothing. How are we prepared to handle how we're feeling? We were fatter. We were more diabetic. We saw more isolation. What we saw is that the very things that make us human, like our brains need to be around other brains. That piece people forget about. Like your brain cannot be in social isolation. And it's not enough to be in a Zoom call with your friends. Like you actually have to be around other human beings. Like otherwise your brain is freaking out. All of those stresses that we were talking about, plus the physical stress, plus the existential reality of that your family could be dying, you could be losing your job, all of those psycho-emotional things. What we saw was that we had a population who had been failed by our health and wellness industries. What we saw is that there was an isolation pockets of people who were like, yeah, I was able to cook and had my own home gym and I could meditate and use right. And we had this vertical where we were really intact and managing, suffering because our gyms were closed, but we were still good. And the rest of the world, we just left behind. And so one of the things that Juliet and I are, really feeling strongly about right now is if we're really going to make this fitness and wellness industry worth a crap, and we really do have to, eventually we're going to have to turn around and say, hey, we're not really serving society. We're just serving ourselves. We have better abs and more tans and on Instagram, and it hasn't transformed our communities at all. In fact, we're leaving everyone behind. And now it's starting to look like equity and justice, right? And don't get me wrong, like everyone has a choice, it's way more complicated than that. It is super complex. And it takes a minute to teach people how to navigate this thing. And we can put pain or exercise or nutrition or stress or any one of those things can be, do you know how to handle yourself as a human being? By the way, there's lots of different ways to do that. I don't really care how you do it, but you have to come out unharmed or less harmed. And our crisis and observation, we just fell on our faces. That's how well we were prepared for this thing.
It seems like a difficult message to get across. I mean, in my little ways, I try. And I live in a weird situation where I'm a comedian. and then like into promoting health. Like this show is all about, hey, I'm giving you the information. Hopefully it's in an entertaining way. So spoonful of sugar, I'm going to feed it to you with fun, and you're going to learn a lot. But I realize that not everyone can listen to Huberman. Not everyone can listen to, so I'm your average guy, and I can give it to you the way I've kind of gotten it, and I lead a pretty healthy life for the most part, and I can show you the way to get out of your situation. So you're not going to go in full. You're not changing your whole life. You're not becoming a monk. You're not chanting
that doesn't work.
Meditate. Right. But so I'm your average guy. I'm your guy that has kids and a family, and I I have a drink on the weekends, but I can show you the way. I can show you how not to do it. And I just feel like it's just falling on deaf ears at all times. Even my own family, not my direct family that I live with, but my extended family, it's brutal. It's brutal. And I've lost some of them to it. And it crushes me that even the people closest to me, I can't have an impact on. And they'll come to me. I will try to explain something to them, and then they come to me when it's too late, and they go, "Hey, the doctor says I need more electrolytes and more protein." I'm like, "Really? Huh? Who else said that?" Why did it? But I believe we're a reactionary society instead of proactive.
Oh, for sure.
And that is our biggest. I mean, that's the United States to a T, and it's the United States more than anywhere else.
Well, let me just give the United States a hug for a second and just say, I think this is human nature until the system is set up so that you're constrained to make the right choice. So, a lot of other cultures are set up in a way where you automatically make a different choice. You walk to the market, right? This is what everyone sits down together and eats Sunday dinner, and someone cooks that. You take public transportation, which forces you to walk and go outside, where there are bikes everywhere, and the city is set up more friendly for bikes. So amplify that times generations and decades, and you do start to see different choices, different behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. The commoditization of health and the commoditization of food and entertainment in the United States is unmatched. It's unparalleled. I mean,
True.
The things we put in our food here, like here's an example. I love gummy bears. I grew up eating gummy bears. I grew up in southern Germany, running around. My mom was a single working mother. She was a professor and I lived south of Munich in the Bavarian Alps. It was like it was a joke. My childhood was a joke. I rode my bike. Sometimes I'd be
near
late
the Eagle's Nest.
That's Berchtesgaden, but north a little bit. But sometimes I'd be like, I was late for class because there were cows walking down the middle of the street and I had to wait for a second, right? I mean, that was literally my childhood.
Oh, I've been all through there. It's beautiful.
Okay. So I was in Garmisch. And it turns out that the German gummy bears are sweetened with fruit juice and flavored with fruits, and there's no high fructose corn syrup. So they have completely different ingredients, completely different things, same candy. Come over to the United States and they're like, we can do it cheaper and we can do artificial everything. Yeah. And they actually taste better. They taste differently. And as an allegory, that's one of the problems. Look, eating a bunch of gummy bears, eating a handful of gummy bears once in a while is not the limiting factor to your success or not, right? It's not all or nothing. We're very tolerant. But you really bring up this wonderful point that one is that people are being subsumed by the level of peak internet fitness bullshit, silliness. We're seeing changes in our fundamental behaviors as humans. The difference between being a kid in the 70s and a kid now is monumental. I'm like, that's a garden hose, kids. That's where you drink your water during there's electrolytes in the hose. It's built in. And, my kids are like, I don't drink from hoses. That's crazy. Like I have this bespoke yerba mate. My 17-year-old's giving me the stink eye. So, the glacial pace is the breakneck pace until we redefine our society. Like if you don't want kids to drink soda at middle school, you just ban middle school sodas. Like we're not smart enough or strong enough for that. Like that's crazy, right? You make a soda pop so expensive that people are like, whoa, okay, let's all share one as a family on a Tuesday night. It's a special occasion. Like that was what a soda was, a special occasion. You would bring it, you'd get a soda when you went to field trips, and you wrap it in aluminum foil. And it was such a big deal to have a Coke, full sugar soda. Juliet and I are really, my work has been in high performance athletics, and I work with every branch of the government and every kind of professional sports team you can see. From the CIA to the Niners to the All Blacks to Team England soccer, like I get to see everyone's dirty laundry. But I'm 49, turning 49 this year, and Juliet is 49, and we are both like, holy crap. We're playing less and less to see how hot we can get the engine, and more to say, how do we keep this diesel running for another 50 years? And that is a slightly different output or slightly different take on the world. How do we become more durable? And then where can we start that conversation earlier and earlier? So we have a new book coming out in April called Built to Move. That is what we think are like the most 10 essential behaviors or clusters of behaviors around being durable. And it's not diet, believe it or not, and it's not exercise. The nutrition chapter is you need to eat more fruits and vegetables, and you need to hit some protein macros. We don't tell you not to eat anything. We're like, you can be carnivore, you can be keto, you can be vegetarian, you can be vegan, but unless you get this much protein and eat this much fruits and vegetables, we think that you're full of shit. And it turns out, for example, that when we remove the diet and the exercise and we make people walk more and sit on the ground and work on their balance and begin a breathing practice, and as you say, the way you're approaching with your people, I am a real person who has multiple jobs, family. Like you actually are sort of the prototype person. You're not a monk who lives in a gym, with your food being delivered to you. Juliet and I are the same. We have 2 daughters. We have a business. We have, we are real people. So all of these best behaviors, we have to, one, show people how they integrate together, how they interact with one another. If you walk more, you actually are more likely to be tired enough to fall asleep. So you don't have to take all these sleep meds. And then because you can actually fall asleep, you don't wake up super tired and have to have a caffeine all day long and at 4:00, which fucks up your sleep. Then you have alcohol to counteract that. Now you're in this depressant stimulant cycle. I'm just saying, hey, let's get you walking more, because that's what humans need to do. You need to load your tissues and you need to circulate your sewers. If we can do those things, if we can get people showing how it's, one, really simple to rewild the body, and 2, how you can drop this into your life without having to stop seeing friends or doing the things you love. You can still watch TV. I'm just saying, sit on the floor while you watch TV. That's what I'm saying. And suddenly we think we have an opportunity to really help take the lessons of high performance and transmute them to the people that really matter, which is society. E.O. Wilson, the evolutionary biologist, says, or said, he's dead now, but he said, the highest calling of science was to serve the humanities. And I believe that truly. Like that really is what's up. And we have come to believe that the highest calling of sports and fitness is to transform community. But we're not doing that. We're not taking those lessons and applying them backwards. And I think we have a moment now, because everyone's sort of saying, hey, I don't think this is really working. What's going on? But that's also being combated by the fact that you now aren't in this attention economy where I have 11 or 12 seconds to get your attention on social media, right? Sure. That's not working anymore. We're not using social media to teach anymore. We're using social media to entertain. So unless you can TikTokify your message and actually get someone to watch it for a second, we're going to have to go back to books and community. And I'm going to be like, Eddie, why do you have abs? I want abs. What are you doing? And you're like, it's easy. I eat protein and I walk.
It's scary though. I mean, I've harped on it a lot lately in this podcast because I have a social media manager and he'll say to me, we post my jokes, we clip them, cut them. I would rather people watch my hour-long special and sit down and enjoy the whole thing and consume it all, not for selfish reasons, but I don't feel like my art that I'm creating is great in a clipped form. I don't think anybody's is. And I think on this scale of, like, I've always argued art versus commercialism, and it's on this linear plane. And I've always said, hey, I'm somewhere in between, in the middle of art versus commercialism. I'm not too commercial. I'm not too artistic. I'm right there in the middle. But I think as a society, we've moved that we are so commercial now that the art is going away because everything's built on these algorithms of my social media manager will call me and go, hey, that they love your jokes about your wife killing you. Write more jokes about your wife killing you. And I go, but I'd have to get her to try to kill me again. And it's like, I can't, that's not what I'm trying to portray. And I'm not, and there was a joke I had that went viral about guns, and it went so viral. And the joke was basically making fun of the people that fight against guns and saying like, you're not going to win because you're fighting against people that have guns. And I was like, you got to know your enemy, and they've got guns. You don't have guns. You're trying to ban the guns, but they have the guns. And the whole joke is about, but it got taken on by the far right, and it became like viral in the far right community. And my manager was like, maybe you should lean into it. Maybe you should lean into it. I'm like, no, I don't want to lean into that. That's not how I feel. I was making fun of them, and I'm not against guns, but I'm not for them. And he was like, yeah, but you have an audience there and they want that. And I go, yeah, but that's what Donald Trump did. He leaned into that audience. I don't want to lean into something I don't believe in just because it's going to get me financial. But I believe as a society, we are. And that's what the algorithm's doing. You see these girls, these CrossFit girls who are now working out without all their clothes on practically, because they know those videos get more clicks, more views, get them more sponsorship. And so we're moving in a society. It's like Idiocracy, the movie. More and more, we're getting closer and closer to this like dumbing down of us, because the dopamine and everybody swiping. What gives me a hit? What gives me a hit? Let's go. And it's crazy. It's crazy to the point where I'm worried. I last night I sat down with my wife after the kids went to bed, and I said, I was over playing with I took my son over for a bike ride, and all these boys were playing or came home, and I said, hey, do you guys know how to play kick the can? He said, no. I said, all right, I'm going to teach you how to play kick the can. And then I taught him how to play release. They had the best day running all over the yard, chasing each other. And it was, it reminded me of me growing up in the 70s. I'm like, this is great. They're running. I was running with them. I was teaching them how. I'm like, this is awesome. This is what you need to do. Move and play. And this is what, and at a certain point I was like, all right, I'm exhausted. I'm done. And as soon as I quit, within, I would say it was 2 minutes, every single one of them had an iPad or phone in their hands. And I took a picture of it. They're all sitting together in a room, and every single one of them's on a different screen. They're not sharing an experience together. They're in their own individual world, all playing different games, and they've just zoned out. And I was like, this isn't a picture of health right here. This is there's something creepy about this.
This is so important when we now have this idea that this technology, unless we all kind of like, we're going to throw the phones down the toilet on 3, 1, 2, 3. No, you go first. Like, unless that happens, it's sticking around, and we're going to have to come to an equilibrium on it anyway. Then we really have to make sure that there is an antidote to that, which is you have to go run and play and be outside, and the Pew Center, the research, the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation, the amount of screen time everyone's getting is insane. And, it's not like you didn't watch Mork and Mindy and, all of the bad TV, right? As much as you could. So I don't think that's changed so much, but what we have seen is a change in all the other aggregate behaviors that around that minimize the cost or minimize the effect of that screen time. And I think that's in total, in sum, is the problem. You brought it right up. Our daughter Caroline just went on a 2-week-hour bound trip. We appreciate that not everyone can do that. We understand, but one of our family values is wilderness and being outside, where they collected the phones for 2 weeks. Kids did not have a phone. They could not text their parents. And I was like, how many parents would pay to have their kids go tech-free on a tech-free binge for 2 weeks? And, Juliet and I and our oldest daughter went on a 6-day river trip in the most remote part of the country, in the middle of Utah, on the Green River. And we had to bring a satellite phone because we went 2 days without seeing a single other party. And if one of us gets hurt, like we're out there, and there's no cell phone, we're reading books, we're hanging out, we're chit-chatting. And, I say that by way of reminding people that if you constrain the environment, if you go for a family adventure and you collect all the phones and put them in a jar before you go, there'll be no phones, right? You just, it's not that this tech is bad. It's inherently addictive, per your saying, you get the serotonin bump. So you have to begin to think differently about how you constrain your environment. I learned this a long time ago. If I don't want to eat cookies at 2 a.m, I don't have cookies in the house. Otherwise, I'll literally wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, you know what? These cookies aren't safe until I go handle them. And so it's better for me not to have that. I mean, I say this to my daughters all the time. Girls, if you don't want to be caught doing blow off a stripper's ass in Vegas, don't buy cocaine, don't go to Vegas, don't hang out with strippers. And my girls are like, good points, Dad. And the point is, we have to be thinking differently. If you want, Juliet figured this out. We have fruits and vegetables in our house all the time. Guess what? Kids did not eat fruits and vegetables. If Juliet cuts up the fruits and vegetables into little jars and little amusements, all the fruits and vegetables get consumed in our house. So you have to think about how to constrain the environment and shape the environment for a better outcome. That has to happen from when you wake up to the end of the day, and you just keep rinse, wash, repeat. Lane Norton, he's Bio Lane. He's just a great thinker and researcher on nutrition. Had a post recently. He said, you know what? You're not going to like this, everyone, but what you need is consistency. Not 1 week, not 3 weeks, not a 6-week juice cleanse, not 6 months. You need 6 years of consistency. You need 6 decades of consistency. The amount of consistency people required to make these big changes in your health is really remarkable. I was a young grad student and in physical therapy. I'm watching a coronary artery bypass graft surgery. I see this 300 plus pound guy. He's very obese. He's like 5'2", 5'4". He has the most beautiful family in the whole world waiting for him. I'm the physical therapist sitting in the surgery. Gorgeous wife, gorgeous daughters. He's an attorney. He's rich, and he cannot change his behaviors. There's nothing in his life that's stronger than the need to self-soothe through alcohol and cigarettes and food to cope. He's rich. He's won the lottery. His family is gorgeous. And I see him naked on the table. And I swear, this is what I imagine now. I was watching the nurses catheterize him, right? Put the tube up his willy. And I swear they were like smoking cigarettes, chit-chatting, like, ha, like, we'll get this guy. And like, you want to do the deed? And I was like, if you could show this guy this video of him being naked and these 2 charge nurses catheterized, maybe that would change his behavior. But in that moment, I had this profound realization that that's how powerful our brain chemistry is. That if you cannot change a fundamental behavior about your life and you have everything to live for and you've won the lottery, that how can I, as a meager mortal person, possibly combat serotonin, the bump, the sugar bump, the drug? Like, you can see how we have no match for our body's brain chemistry to survive and to feel good and pleasurable.
So what do we do? Give up?
You put yourself into situations where you don't have a choice. You have to do the right thing. You have to, and it really is simple behaviors. You've got to protect your sleep. And I mean, like, not like I go to bed 11, get up at 6. That means you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep. That's crazy, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to, I know you did the math there, but it's because you're awake 30 to 60 minutes every night.
Right.
You've got to walk more, and you need to track that until it becomes a behavior, right? We use our friend E.C. Sinkowski, her 800-gram challenge, for example. So one of our core nutrition principles is we want you to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day. So you're carnivore, you can eat 800 grams of guava and do whatever you want, right? But we want you to hit protein macros, 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound body weight. An egg has 6 grams of protein, so you can think of it that way. 1.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound body weight. We want you to get 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day. And if you want to eat cookies after eating 800 grams of fruits and vegetables, knock yourself out.
It's pretty hard to do.
A pound of cherries is like 230 calories. Go ahead and eat a pound of cherries. Eat so many cherries that you have explosive diarrhea and tell me you're like, oh, I'm so hungry. Hand me those cookies. You're not going to do it. So what we feel like is instead of restricting, making fear, we're like, dude, you want to do this all with bananas and apples? Knock yourself out. You'll make it bananas and apples for a few days, and you're going to be like, hey, what are those grapes? What are those blueberries? What are those? It forces you to eat more food. Corn, potatoes, beans, like that's not the limiting factor. And then suddenly when you're eating all of this protein, which makes you full, and you're like, oh my God, I don't have enough protein grams, I have to eat again. That's a revolution that people have never experienced before, where I'm like, no, you have to eat more to hit these baselines. When you start to do those things and you start to think differently about your environment, then suddenly you will start to feel better, and feeling better begets different choices.
You know, it's funny on the show we recently did an experiment. I think, Mike Anderson from CrossFit Malibu and Dylan Farr from Physiologic, and they came on and I was their guinea pig. They had me eat McDonald's for 30 days straight.
Oh my gosh.
But I didn't eat McDonald's like Morgan Spurlock ate it. I ate it like making the best choices possible, where I would get a double quarter pounder with cheese and take the bread off and have nothing on it. I would eat the chicken sandwich and take all the bread off of it, and no sauce or anything like that. Before I'd work out, I might have a chocolate milk or like a small French fry. I lost about 11 pounds total. I gained 3 pounds of muscle, and I lost 5 pounds of fat. We did DEXA scans, blood. My blood work, all my cholesterol stayed the same. My HDL went up a little bit. My C-reactive protein went down, and my HB1AC went down. So I ate more protein than I've ever eaten. I was eating about 1.5 pounds of protein a day, and I gained muscle. And I'm 51 years old, and I gained muscle. And
this is, people don't understand. They just don't get that is what humans do. And I think it's that slippery slope. I mean, a long time ago when paleo first came out, right? I'm discovering paleo in like 2002. And 2003, and I bring it to my wife, and I'm like, Juliet, check this out. We're eating like whole foods again, less processed food. And Juliet's like, she Googles paleo, and what she comes up with is fermented hornets like nest soup. And she's like, I think this is bullshit. And, it's like so early in the day, it hasn't even happened. And, when you start to show people, again, one of the things I'm most proud of is I have these two girls, I have a 14-year-old, 17-year-old, freshman, senior, who know how to eat food, know how to cook. Like our 17-year-old is incredible cook. For no other reason that we're like, you're going to be leaving the house and you need to know how to shop and cook. And she had a boyfriend who just went to college, and, he could cook. And, what we're seeing is that we have a whole generation of kids who don't know how to do that. So of course you would default, if no one has said, this is how you prepare, this is how you shop, this is how you prepare meals, this is how you cook, this is how you organize. So we just have to think differently about the problem, and I think that's one of the things you can do anytime people are coming at you. We'll just say, well, how's our experiment looking so far? Well, I'll tell you, we're failing on every front. So maybe we need to change the experiment a little bit. I think one of the problems with being a human is that you're so tolerant and durable that sometimes you can't see the results of your experiment for decades and decades and decades. Then you can turn around backwards, and people are like, how do you know? Well, I'm like, well, it's true. It took a lot of people to die smoking for us to say, hey, smoking isn't great, right? Because you and I could go share a pack of cigarettes tomorrow, a 6-pack of cigarettes. That's how often I smoke, obviously. Yeah. And you and I would be fine. We would feel like crap, and we'd be vomiting and nauseous from all the nicotine, we would be able to buffer that easily. And I think if you take your 17-year-old, 20-year-old self, and you look at what you were able to get away with, and still the tolerance that your system had, compare that to your 50-year-old self, you couldn't, people ask me all the time, would you like to be young again? I'm like, no way. That kid was just a dullard. It was a dunce. But I would like to be able to treat my body the way my 17-year-old self could treat his body. That I miss.
Sure. There were 3 things I wrote down that I wanted to ask you about. When you were talking about inflammation in your buddy and his finger, I have this weird thing that I'm wondering about. I've always wondered. I will have, let's say, tendonitis in my elbows. And after I do all my physical therapy and everything, after about 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 2 months, whatever, it leaves. It's gone. Supposedly, I guess it goes out through my lymphatic system. No, Then it shows up in my hips. And then I'll work on my hips for a while. And all of a sudden it'll leave my hips. And then the next thing I know, it's in my shoulder. And I feel like it never leaves. It just moves from one place to another. And that's what I hate about being old. I'm like, why can't this? And just as I start healing my shoulder after doing I still do this exercise you gave me you gave me a barbell and you're like, do this. And it works. Boom, I do it. I'm like, oh, great. Now it's going to my knees. It's headed to my knees.
Well, it takes about 6 weeks for your inflammation to get on the Oregon Trail, leave, the Midwest and make it out to California. And, I don't think people realize that, I have been saying of late, I'm like, the most dangerous new trend in the world is called pickleball. Because middle-aged people don't have to run around. You can kind of stand there and swat the ball. And we're seeing tons of pickleball injuries, like Achilles ruptures and torn biceps and crazy stuff happening. And Juliet just sent me this picture, this New York Times article about pickleball injuries today. She's like, you're right. Like, if the New York Times picks it up, like, she's like, you may be onto a trend. But what we're seeing,
pickleball. I hate it.
I played twice with some very, very competitive people, and it stressed me out. What I'll say is, my biggest fear as I get older is a tissue failure, like rupturing something, tearing something off the bone because I'm 50, right? That's my brain is like, you're fine. You can totally do this. Your body is like, bro, you didn't warm up. You wanted to go fast. So a lot of the things the choices I make in the gym are about just exposing my tissues. Like, I jump rope every day. After I get off this call with you, I'm going to go run a hill a little bit just so that I can have exposure of that kind of loading in my Achilles tendon, so that if I have to go sprint and play some Frisbee or pickleball, I'm not going to rupture my Achilles. But then
That's how I fucked up my Achilles. That's how I did it. I have a bad Achilles now from running up hills.
So now I'm thinking, what are the building blocks of my nutrition and hydration so that I have those things on board so that I can keep my tissues tolerant of my silly behavior. And I think that's really where I want, if you're listening to this and you're like, you're fitness curious or wellness curious, you have to be loading in ways that are exposing you over time to some speed, to some elements, because if you're missing this exposure, you don't have a movement practice, you're going to get caught with your pants down. I guarantee you. And it's harder and harder to come back.
Look, we watch animals that still, like, I see it with my animal. It's just a very easy analogy. I have a 14 and 15-year-old dog. I have a 2-year-old dog. My 14 and 15-year-old dog are doing really well, and they do better. We were out of town for 6 weeks, and we had a dog walker that stayed with them and walked them 2 walks a day. I came back. They looked like they were 10 years old again. And I was like, we need to walk these dogs twice a day on long walks. They do better. And I go, this is just an analogy for us in life.
That's right.
In humans.
That's right.
We need to move. Every time someone gets
consistency for decades.
When people get sick, I always tell them when they get COVID, they're like, what do I do? What do I do? I go, if I were you, I would sleep a lot. And then as soon as you wake up, move around a lot. I was like, move around and like, let your blood move through your body and get the virus out of your body. And that's what I did. I got COVID. I'd sleep like 11 hours. I'd get up and I'd go for walks. And I would walk like 2 miles, come home, eat, go for another walk. And I was like, it was gone in 3 days. Like it was gone in 1 day. And it could be that I just got a little case of it, but I have that theory. It just sounds like that's what our body wants to do. I always go, what would a coyote do if a coyote got COVID?
I think COVID science apart, so much of what Juliet and I are thinking about now is saying, what are the life behaviors that we can do every day that better insulate us from the trauma that's happening, that's coming? We're going to get cancer. We're going to get sick. We're going to get hit by a car. I've had my knee replaced because I crashed skiing. Juliet had breast cancer a couple of years ago. Like, both of us were able to handle those things and the surgeries and the trauma because we had a little bit more resilience built in, as you said, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of the one thing tipping us over, we had some muscle mass, we had behaviors that engaged, we were a little bit more robust. And I think, here's a great example of what you're talking about with your pets. We have a used cat. He's a vintage cat. We got him 6 years old from the pound. He was returned. And we gave him the best cat food we could buy, the best upper middle class white people cat food we could buy. And we're like, we're such good cat owners. And then one day he was drinking obsessively from the fountain. And we realized, oh, our cat probably has diabetes. And we take him in and he has cat diabetes. And at the same time, Juliet and I are like, well, why does he have cat diabetes? Like, this is weird. And we looked at his food, and it turns out cats, wait for it, are obligate carnivores. They don't eat potato and wild rice and grains at all. They eat meat and solely meat.
Yep.
So we, knowing something about nutrition and life and health and wellness, gave our cat diabetes by feeding it the most bespoke cat food. So we switched. Our daughter, Georgia, gave our cat insulin shots twice a day for a year, and we switched him to an all-meat diet, what a cat is supposed to eat, and lo and behold, his diabetes went away. And we're like, wow, if I can give my cat diabetes and I know better, that's how tricky it is for people who don't have the information. If someone said to you, oh, you have a cat, you only feed it meat for the rest of its life. You're like, okay, I know the rules of a cat. But I had done what society said was buy this bespoke, it was cat food made by a guy in Brooklyn with an apron and a mustache. And it was like bespoke cat food. Like we fell into the trap, and it was our fault. So that's what you're saying is, hey, your dogs did better when they moved more because they're dogs, and our cat did better when it ate what cats are supposed to eat, meat. That's a pretty good metaphor for what we should be doing and how we should be behaving.
But you can't look. None of us have figured out how to stop old age. It still exists, and things like and trying to keep up to the level we have. Yeah, we'll see the video of the 100-year-old guy run the 100-meter sprint or whatever there is, and we all hope to be that guy, but there's certain things that are just going to break down, and it's like you can push it and push it. You look at Kelly Slater, 50 years old and surfing the way he does. There's certain things that can't, but how long till that ends? And things like collagen is, what we worry about. You worry most about your joints and ligaments. Your bones hold up. Like I get DEXA scans all the time. My muscles are good. My bones are good. When it comes to like joints and ligaments, that seems to be where all the issues come. So can things like collagen, can that help us and keep us from to prolong us a little bit longer from those things falling apart?
I suspect that one of my favorite books is called Deep Nutrition by Kate Shanahan. She's a physician, and she basically was like, what are all our traditional eating sort of programs, behaviors from around the world? And it turns out people eat a lot of fermented foods, right? They eat a variety of fruits and vegetables year round, like a variety. We used to eat 50. Now most people eat 3 kinds of fruits and vegetables. She's like, we also cooked all our meat on the bone and ate all the skin. I was talking to Gray Cook, this physical therapist. He's like, Kelly, what do you think the first food was that humans fed each other besides mother's milk? And I was like, probably some kind of bone broth, because that's what we were. He's like, yep, and marrow. So I suspect that the amount of collagen we're supposed to eat is nowhere near what we're actually eating. So once again, do I think you need to supplement with collagen? Probably. But also you probably were supposed to cook, like that sashimi chicken breast you're getting at Whole Foods or Erewhon. That is like what you give the dogs. You need to eat the skin. You need to eat off the bone. You need to cook it. You need to eat all the soups. So we have this deficit of these sort of substances that we were eating traditionally, in our bodies, and suddenly we're not eating. And I think it's those kinds of things. It comes back to these first principles, first behaviors. And then is something you said, you've got to continue to move. So at a cellular level, there's this concept called mechanotransduction. And mechanotransduction means if you want your tissues to express themselves at the very level of the cell, the DNA, you have to mechanically load it. And you're like, whoa, that's deep. Until you realize a tendon has to be loaded concentrically, eccentrically, isometrically. You have to lower yourself down from the squat. You have to pause. You have to stand back up. If you want your quad ligament to be strong, if you want to have a weak ass ligament and tendon, don't load it. The bone thing is, we're finding that your bone density in your 20s really matters, right? That's when you start putting it in. turns out that when you flex a bone, you create a little bit of an electrical charge. It's a piezoelectric crystal charge. So you have these piezoelectric crystals phenomenon in your bone. You flex the bone. There's a little charge that happens. And then the osteoblasts are like, holy crap, those are the cells that build the bone. They are attracted to that charge and they make the bone stronger in that area. So if you don't load your bones, it doesn't matter how many calcium chews you're taking, you're never going to actually have bones that are stronger. So suddenly you're like, okay, I have to load my tissues in order for them to be strong. Well, we're seeing like we sell some protocols on our site. Our plantar fascia protocol kills. Our Achilles protocol kills. I'm like, dude, your feet are the most important part of like your body, like your hands, your feet. I mean, it's so important. Mm-hmm. But what you're doing is not loading, not walking, not decongesting, not jumping, not like, and so what we have is this sort of type 1 error. Your plantar fascia throws this error message and you're like, I don't know what happened. I have the most expensive running shoe. Like what happened is you haven't loaded the tissue to be tolerant. So it's simultaneously.
I need to get on the ready state and use your, I did the Achilles. I went away. I did all my exercise, went away, and then started running again and boom, back. And I was like, and it was gone for like a year. I was like, I got rid of it. Boom, right back.
Yeah. And, again, this is an interesting thing where we can start to ask, well, do you have normal range of motion in your ankles? Did you ramp up your volume? Because honestly, the problem with a lot of I
ramped up my volume too fast.
Yeah. A lot of our superstars is that you have a big aerobic engine, but you have tissues that can't tolerate it. Cause you can I can do all these other things and let me go play the sport. And we used to be much more in the strength and conditioning field. We used to be a lot more protected because we weren't very fit and we weren't very strong. Like in CrossFit, for example, we weren't very fit and we weren't very strong. And now people are extremely fit and extremely strong, and you can just overdo it really quickly, So how do you put yourself like, I'm going to do 10 deadlifts today and 11 tomorrow? And we really have to take some of these baby steps to give your tissues a chance to come on board.
Okay. Inflammation. This is another thing that I've always wondered. Everybody always wants to get rid of inflammation. I know you're a fan of Gary Ronald. I've had Gary on the show a bunch of times and love the guy, but I do believe that kind of thing of like, this is a natural process. So when somebody's going, well, you've got to get rid of the inflammation. It's like, well, do I, or should I let it do its
let's
job?
Define. So you use this word inflammation and people are like, I'm doing this juice cleanse to deal with inflammation. I'm like, what inflammation are you talking about? How are you measuring it? Oh, A1C, homocysteine, like we can start to see where active protein, we have blood markers. So did you get your blood panel done before and after this set of behaviors? Because those are those systemic markers of chronic inflammation. You and I are talking about the kind of inflammation that happens, the congestion that happens is a normal process of loading your tissues and having them respond to exercise or to load, right? And so there's sort of two things going on. I can be chronically puffy, chronically inflamed because I'm eating tons and tons of highly processed carbohydrate and I'm drinking and I'm not sleeping. That was what happened to my friend's finger when we were traveling. But then I can also say, hi, I did 1,000 squats yesterday. I went for a big run with my friends. And now, man, I'm a little bit congested and my body's had a stimulus that disrupted my homeostasis. And now I'm having an adaptation response. So if you didn't know this, everyone, exercise makes you weaker. It's true. If we do a bunch of pull-ups, then I go out here and test you again, you're going to be weaker, you're going to do less pull-ups. But what happens is you have a response to that stimulus. Your body's like, oh, just like the bones, let's make these muscles and tendons and ligaments stronger first. Then tomorrow or the next day, you'll be able to do more pull-ups. And it turns out in muscles, for example, the first thing that happens after you exercise is that you lay down a collagen scaffolding. Your fascia gets stronger, your ligaments and tendons, the container gets stronger, then muscles get built afterwards. It's like your body's like, oh, you want a bigger engine in this Ferrari? Let's make sure the chassis can handle it. Then we'll put another cylinder on. So now you're suddenly asking yourself, well, what can I do to facilitate the best response? Well, I can make sure I have enough protein on board. I can make sure I have enough micronutrients on board, right? I can make sure that my body can really manage that. and I can continue to move to circulate take the garbage out and bring the groceries in. And when you suddenly just look at exercise through those lenses, it becomes much more reasonable. When we're attacking inflammation, I'm like, how are you measuring that? Your face looks less puffy. Cool. That's a subjective, piece, but the real issue is looking at, these blood markers over time. And then theoretically, and this is one of the reasons we love to chase performance, is that a system that is more robust, a system that is sort of respecting its physiology, can go harder in the paint more often, more days in a row for longer. So we really end up seeing performance as the metric, wattage, poundage, total volume over the week. It allows us to work harder with less session cost. So ultimately, we use performance as the true arbiter of, hey, if you're eating this way, you can actually generate more watts. If you're eating this way, you can generate less watts.
Well, but everything you turn to on the internet, you go, hey, I got this. And they're like, take some anti-inflammatories. It's like the first thing they tell you to do. And I'm not a fan of them. If anything, I'll take curcumin. And, I'm like, I don't want to mess with my liver. I did that enough in my 20s. And
yeah, well, let's say if you're in chronic pain and you have a pain condition that allows you to move because you have something going on with your system or some changes, ibuprofen is a miracle drug. But we should treat it like a miracle drug. Like we should have the bottle of ibuprofen on the shelf. And when the doors open, we're like, oh, and then you dose out the pills because that pill allows you to do your job or solve some heroic problem. It's that powerful drug. It's not something you take because I'm hungover and I'm like, take the hangover, just take it. And, but there are your point of, hey, I've done this thing, I've sprained my ankle. Let me just stop my healing response. That's super weird. Instead of it's like, hey, I've sprained my ankle. How am I going to walk more? How am I going to move the joint more? How am I going to eat in a way that gives my body a chance to manage this? How can I minimize the sleep stress, all those other things? That's the thing we need to teach people how to do. And it's not that complicated,
Okay. I know I'm going over my time with you, but I know you're the busiest man in the world, but I have a few questions that I want to know. Why don't they call making a cow masturbating a cow or milking a cow masturbating a cow? Have you ever wondered that?
Well, I feel like that falls into more of a breast milk fetish thing. Like that's really what you're into. So I don't think that's what it is. I think you're like, oh, you're drinking that breast milk fetish latte. That's what it is.
It's really,
is that creepier or less creepy?
I don't know, but it just looks like it. That wasn't one of the questions. That was for another guest. You went to the games. After being at the games, like you said, they've gotten super strong. Like they're unbelievable. Do you think the eternal question, Rich Froning versus Matt Fraser, who would win?
Different eras. That's what I'll say. Froning's
still doing it.
There is no Matt Fraser without Rich Froning. That's what I'll say. I'll say that Rich is such a consummate athlete. And here's why I think Fraser is incredible and what he's done and what he's doing with Mal is amazing. Here's what's really impressive about Rich Froning, who is a good friend of mine. I show up at the games and he's supporting businesses. He's got his kids there. His mom is there. He's riding around in the parking lot with his daughter on a bike in between events. He's managing the team and coaching and encouraging all the other people who are on the Mayhem. He is a CEO platform level guy and he's doing it. So his degree of difficulty every year has gotten more and more insane, not just because he's like this hyper-focused monk, but because he's doing that piece and he's doing all of these other things. Mm-hmm. Our friend Laird says, and I don't want to offend anyone here, but Laird says, hey, you're not confirmed as a man until you have a baby. And he's not saying you have to have a baby to be a man or to be an awesome person. Don't be triggered here. What he's saying is it's super cool that you're really good at your life and your job. Can you be a member of a family and take care of another human being and still be awesome at your job? Those are wholly different games. And it is more impressive to see the kind of relationships Rich is able to manage and nourish at a place like the games on top of doing all of that. That's why, for me, he is just a consummate athlete, and he gets better and better and better and better.
But I just still think, if we look at, I was talking to Hinshaw, and he said if he was in the games this year as an individual, you're talking about maybe a podium finish. Like,
for
the
sure.
guy is still that good.
Yeah. Do you remember that Pyros Demas? He snatched the same. He was a Greek Olympic lifter, everyone, just in case you're not up on your Greek Olympic liftings. And he snatched the same snatch for like 4 Olympics. Like his clean and jerk would go up a little bit, but he won a gold medal, like 3 or 4 golds, but he'd always snatch the same thing. So you could argue in the course of 16 years, he didn't actually get better. He managed to be the best Olympic lifter in his weight class for that many years, doing the same thing. That is so remarkable and freaky at that level, when like the loads and tissues. So look, I think this generation of young athletes is really remarkable. I don't actually think we know where the limit is yet. There are some really hyper talented people. What I'm stoked for is that Matt Fraser has done a great job of bringing some athletes along with him. He's shown that you can leave a sport intact. I mean, he already had broken his back, but he left his sport intact when he was still at the top and was able to launch a successful career. I think that's another side business. I think that is also a reason to look at Matt as a person, to be like, hey, there's something here that's really extraordinary. He was an extraordinary competitor, but he did it in such a different way. And I think that also shows you, like, Rich has to have his family around him. He's this other thing. That's what makes him. He runs this huge gym in Cookeville, Tennessee, where thousands of people come. He does train with Rich. And Matt was like more of a monk model. He had a couple training partners. He did it very focused. So I think you have this personality and you have this personality. They can both be great. And that's what we should be looking at, is that there's not one way to the top. So I think they're different athletes in that way. And then you can have your favorite as you like.
I'm gonna give you someone to look up and just go down this internet wormhole. Check out Willie Gault. Do you remember Willie Gault, the football player?
Yes.
He's an incredible track runner. Look at what he did in Masters track, and look at the times he ran up into his like 50s. And it's freaky. You're like, wait a minute, this guy's still running this fast at this age. No one ever talks about that, because one of the things that goes is sprinting ability with age, that people go, oh, that's the best way to get injured and get hurt. And you just can't keep up that speed. Look at Willie Gault's times and you'll be like, no, not possible. Not possible.
Well, I think someone like that, that's super important, because it shows us what is possible, that we don't have to accept that. Like, if I come back to Laird is 10 years older than I am. He's 59. He's turning 60 this year. And one of the things that I see is, I'm like, oh, that's still what's possible for my output in 10 years from now. I can still be shredding big waves. I just can't take the hits. And Laird has gotten really good at removing the trauma so that he can be, the bangs, foiling.
But Laird's taken some real beatings. The last time I saw him, he was limping pretty bad. He had a bad hip. And he's really beat up his body, like on another level, like an NFL football player.
And if you follow him, you're like, wow, look at the amount of input he's in, and the practice and the movement and the nutrition that allows him to do that. Willie Gault, had really great parents. So no one talks about that, right? That there's if you want to be an elite athlete, choose your parents better. Like, that's true. Not all bodies are the same. Like, we want to pretend in our woke egalitarian selves that like everyone has the potential for elite performance. That's horse crap. That's horse shit.
Yeah.
So, but two is that consistent application. So I was just talking with someone about Jerry Rice and his crazy workouts, right? And I was like, forget that it wasn't the crazy workout. That's what he knew he needed to just move and do all of that repetition so that he could do what he wanted to do that long, that well. And some of this is you just have to. There are no shortcuts. If you want to run at a high level, how long have you been running at a high level? Usain Bolt said, if you are great, you are always great. And I think that that's a really nice way of saying, look at how long we've been working at this elite level without taking our foot off the gas.
Speaking of elite, what's the biggest waterfall you've ever kayaked over?
Oh, like 30 feet. Waterfalls. I tell you, I came up, if you want to see how I learned to kayak and when I kayak, there's a documentary called The River Runner. It's about
I watched it. It's amazing.
Okay, so I paddled with all of those guys. That was my era. And I worked with Mikey and Alan in Nepal, and I raced with Steve Fisher, and Chuck Kern is the guy who drowned. We worshiped Chuck. He was a couple of years older than we were. We always felt his brothers were a little dangerous, and we were a little scared of him. We were a little younger, but Chuck was like our icon. And at the end of the movie, the paddler who's the center of the movie, it's a really amazing movie, he goes and paddles the Indus with this next generation. The next generation of kayakers is so insane that they're not just hiking off waterfalls, they're doing flips off waterfalls and loops off waterfalls. And then they're doing a crazy class 5 move into a crazy class 5 move into a waterfall where they do a flip. So it's like 2 orders of magnitude better, more technical, better prepared professionals. It's insane. And the women, Noria Newman, shout out to really, I was paddling in the dark ages, when the sport was coming. I'm like, oh, you ollied, that's so cute. Have you done a YOLO, backflip? What's happening now we see these young kids who are maybe 10 years old who could be ripping on the pro tour 20 years ago. That's what happened. So, I'm still kayaking.
The progression in everything has happened. I think that has a lot to do with the internet. And I grew up doing BMX and skateboarding, and you would see the magazine that came out every month, and you'd be like, oh, somebody learned a new trick. You would work on it. You wouldn't know how exactly they did it. There might be a series of snapshots showing how they did it. But now, I talk to a lot of extreme athletes on here and adventure sports or action sports, and they go, oh yeah, you post it the day you do it, and then 6 kids are doing it the next day because they've broken it down and watched on the video. So the progression is moving at a level that's so freakish. It happens in stand-up comedy even. And there is such progression. And that's one of the good things I think about the internet. That's where I go, there's so much information and so much education, and we do progress to a level. I mean, it's scary because knowing what I know and how hard it was for me to do the things I did, I'm like, wait a minute, I could never. I told Johnny Mosley that. I go, I took off 10 years from skiing. I came back, and you're doing dinner rolls and, triple flips. And I'm going, what? Where was I? What happened while I was gone?
And now he looks, those videos of him in the Olympics look like grandparents, like stuff that recreational skiers. And that's Johnny Mosley, groundbreaking, extraordinary person who invented it, right? So what I want to match then is that we have this on-ramp radically where but we may not have the volume, the reps, the discipline, the tissues to support it. In the first time they had big air vert stuff skiing, the big mountain stuff in skiing, they were worried that they didn't have enough women. Like the top 6 out of 10 women had suffered ACL injuries going this big. And so the top 6 women in the first Olympics weren't there at the Olympics because so there were so many lower extremity injuries from going so big. What we saw was that it takes a while and the training to make sure that we can handle those kinds of loading. But, look, if we're seeing forward progress, and what I'll tell you is that this next generation of athletes who cares about their performance, they're paying attention big time. So once again, that whole idea of performance, because they're starting, it's all about making money for them and getting sponsors. And they're like, what's that thing about sleep? What's that thing about recovery? What's that thing about nutrition? They're playing the games at a phenomenal level. I'm
glad to hear that, because my fear was that these are the tip of the spear. We're seeing the tip of the spear, but we don't see, and we see them when they're on the internet. And I have seen this with a lot of these guys that have been on the show. Even Johnny Mosley told me about when he broke his neck, or, Trevor Jacobs, who was on here, told me how he broke his back. We're seeing them when they're doing it. We don't see the ramifications of the injuries and what it took to get there, or what happens after they got there. And my worry is that the progression is far ahead of the capability of the human body.
It is.
That we're pushing to this limit that is like, I want the stardom, I want the celebrity, but it's only going to be a fleeting moment, because you're going to die afterwards, or you're going to...
I remember Jeremy Jones is being interviewed, big snowboarder, and he's like, they were just talking about how he just bombed down this thing, and he's like, well, we started hiking up it because it would add a degree of difficulty. And he's like, but where are we going with that? And in the background, Travis Rice throws a backflip off of like a gigantic cliff. And he's like, well, there you go. I guess it's 2 backflips now, and then it's 3 backflips. And then you're blindfolded and on fire doing backflips. So you're right. I think we are, I don't know if we've approached it, but it is fun to see what's possible. What we want to do is look at people like Serena Williams, who just retired, and say, what's the core DNA there? How do we take a Lindsey Vonn and remove some of that injury? How did she ski so well? So that ultimately the thing that we're comparing is who is the best athlete, not who had the most resources or the best collagen or the best protein, right? We want to strip, ultimately the game is to strip all of the other features away and let the best athlete, put that best athlete into a situation where she has to be extraordinary and see what happens.
Well, to bring this full circle, it's like you said about an athlete being a parent also, or long lasting, even in CrossFit. How do we do that in CrossFit where we take them from it? Yeah, it's great that while you were 22, you made it to the CrossFit Games, but where are you at 32 and 42 and 52? And I have said that the biggest mistake CrossFit ever made was not valuing the masters athletes more and putting them this side stage where they're like, oh, by the way, we have these old guys that can do it, or old women that can do it. I think they should be the pinnacle. They should be, look at Dave Hippensteel. Look at this guy who's in his 60s, who's doing muscle ups, like 30 muscle ups in a row. This is who we should not all aspire. I mean, as great as Matt Fraser and Rich Froning and Tia Claire Toomey are, and they are unbelievable, we should be aspiring to be Dave Hippenstall. Like, there's the guy that should be, that's incredible to be able to move like that and still maintain muscle mass at his age. And that to me is what should be the ultimate goal, because some of these other guys are going to wash out.
The person who has the most fun the longest, that is winning. That is truly winning. Be able to go on adventures your whole life, and whatever that looks like for you really means you have to do some training. The human being requires a little technique. It requires a little skill intervention. You can do it the other way. You can be an untechnical, you can eat like a maniac. We know with that, we've run that experiment a lot. But if you just do some other things differently, you have no idea still what you're capable of. And it's not just about being shredded on the internet for 2 seconds. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, for us, it's all about adventure. Do we have the body? My wife and I and our 17-year-old just ran this 6-day section of the Green River. And we ran it at relatively low water. It's about 90 miles. And we had to do a lot of rowing to make it in 6 days. So there would be days where we would row for 6 hours. And, against the flat water headwinds. So my daughter would row, my wife would row, I would row. So if you've ever been on a rowing machine where the slide doesn't slide and the damper's stuck at 20, that's what it feels like. And are you now durable enough to unload that, get up and down off the ground, hang out, put yourself in these situations where you can really feel like you can trust your body and you can go hard on your body, and you put enough emphasis, input, practice in that you can come out of that unharmed. That is ultimately the goal.
I kind of want to end it there because I feel like we just got a good clip for the promo that's going on the YouTube short.
All 11 seconds. It's good douche. Let me do that again, this time faster. I'll point and dance.
No, don't worry. We'll put all the captions and timers and the stuff. I've already, all day long, I talk with my wife about how much I hate this stuff, and she's like, "Then go be a monk. Do what you do best and write jokes."
No, you can't do it. Sorry, I'm calling your wife is 100% wrong. I need the smartest, fastest, gnarliest people working on the hardest jobs, and calling it out. I'm sorry, you don't get to quit. But I want you to keep this in mind. Someday you will earn your retirement. And that retirement is you go back to your farm. You've left the battlefield. You're in Rome. You're working the fields with the Elysium soundtrack. And at that moment, you turn off social media. But you haven't earned it yet, bro.
Fuck. All right.
I need you.
Well, speaking of earning it, everyone here needs the Ready State. How do they get it?
Yeah, we are trying to help you sort through position, pain, restoring, giving your body back. We want everyone to do, like, if you did one thing, go to the Ready State. I have so many 10, 20 minute and 30-minute follow along videos. If you have a ball and a roller in your garage, in your house, in your living room, you can start this journey. I'll teach you how to take care of your body. And that's your core practice. Give me 10 minutes a day. Then you can be like, oh, what about my quads? Or what about my knee? Or what about this elbow that hurts? We do all of that too. But go to the Ready State. We have an incredible app. A new version of it's coming, but the app is insanely good. And there's so much information. You want to see how I think? I just did a series on hamstring tendinopathies on the internet. You can see how I take a systems approach, how we think differently about problems. Go to the Ready State, download the app. I guarantee you there's like a week or a 2-week trial in there. Play along, and I guarantee you can feel better.
I was telling on the show about the app, how you have this thing where you can go, okay, because self-diagnosing is really hard, but you have a thing where you can like look at the body and point and go, okay, the pain is here.
Yeah.
And it focuses in. It's like, is the pain here? Is the pain here? Oh, it's right here. Okay. Well, then it's probably this. And this
it's a good place to start, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Your brain is the most complicated structure in the known universe, attached to incredibly complex physiology and incredibly nuanced environments. I think you have a shot at making yourself feel better before you need to go get help. Let's take that slack out of the system. You know, that's where we're going.
TheReadyState.com.
TheReadyState.com.
Or Ready State. Is it the or Ready State? TheReadyState.com.
TheReadyState.com.
So look, you guys have all been stealing Kelly's amazing information for years that he's been so generous to volunteer. Go. Well, get the app for free for a while and see, and I guarantee you'll end up buying it. Thanks for doing the show. I always appreciate it. I consider you a great friend. You've been a great resource. I love you, brother. I love what you've done for people and for the sport and everything. So thank you. And you guys, thanks for listening. Thank you for always being here, listening every week. Go rate, review, comment. But what we really want you to do is watch it on YouTube. We're trying to be found on YouTube.
Yes.
We've always been a podcast. We want to be video.
Yes.
Find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Wodcast Podcast.